I'm 84, and I've cleaned this kitchen every Tuesday morning for close to 60 years. Same mop, same bucket, same yellow bottle I kept under the sink, going on 5 decades. My doctor remarked not long ago that I keep a remarkably clean house for a man living alone. I told him I wasn't entirely sure clean was the right word anymore. I've written some of this down. It's in the Coleman Remedy book. Links in the description. But what I want to tell you today starts long before I wrote a single word of it. There are 6 things sitting under most seniors' sinks right now. I had all 6. Used them for decades without asking one single question. I want to tell you what I found, and the swap that costs about $1. Because I think about all those mornings I woke up and blamed my age for something I had no business breathing in the first place. If any part of that sounds familiar to you, I'd like you to stay. Hit subscribe if you haven't already. And when we're done today, I want to hear from you in the comments. Tell me if any of this sounds like your house. I read every one. Eleanor had a thing about clean. She'd been a nurse for 28 years, and she had seen what happened to people who let things go. So when we moved to our house in Asheville in 1971, she organized the cabinet under the kitchen sink the way some people organize a medicine cabinet. Everything labeled, everything in its place, a specific product for each specific job. The bleach was on the left in the big plastic jug. Next to it, a blue spray bottle. Windows, mirrors, the glass panel in the back door. A thick orange cleaner for the floors. A white foam for the bathroom tiles she'd been using since before I knew her. A disinfectant spray for the counters that smelled like the inside of a hospital hallway. And a yellow bottle of something I used on everything else. Baseboards, the outside of the appliances, the front of the stove. 6 bottles. I couldn't have told you what was in any of them. I never thought to look. They smelled like clean. That was the whole argument. When Eleanor passed in October of 2019, I inherited her routines, the way you inherit the furniture. You don't decide to keep them. You just don't have the heart to change anything yet. And then time passes, and the routines have simply become yours. So on Tuesdays, I got out the yellow bottle, mopped the kitchen floor the way she'd shown me, sprayed the windows, and dried them with old newspaper the way she always had. Let the white foam sit on the tiles for a few minutes before scrubbing. The house smelled a certain way on Tuesday afternoons. Sharp, almost medicinal, a back-of-the-throat kind of sharpness that I had always associated with doing things right. I'd crack open the kitchen window, let it air out, and call the job done. I'd been doing some version of it for 50 years. If it was going to hurt me, I figured I'd know by now. That is the particular error of a man who has survived everything so far. You start to confuse endurance with immunity. You think that because something hasn't killed you, it isn't worth examining. Some mornings I would wake with a tightness in my chest that I could not fully account for. A heaviness behind the eyes before my morning tonic helped clear it. A kind of fog I walked through in the kitchen before I could get out to the garden at 5:30, where the outdoor air would come at me and things would begin to lift. I blamed my age. I blamed grief, because grief does settle somewhere in the body, and it is convenient to blame it for a great many things. I never once thought about Tuesday. My daddy used to say, the most dangerous things are the ones you stop noticing. He meant it about people mostly, about the crack in the foundation you looked at every single day until you didn't look at it anymore. But he had a way of saying things that applied to more situations than the one he had in mind. I'd walk past those 6 bottles every single morning, reach right past them to get the dish soap, open that cabinet without really seeing what was in it. That is how long something can sit right next to you before you think to ask what it is. The thing that troubles me most, looking back, is how reasonable it all seemed. These weren't products I'd ordered from somewhere suspicious. They were things I bought at the grocery store, products with bright, cheerful packaging that every neighbor I knew used without a second thought. One of them had a little bird on the label. I genuinely do not know why I remember that detail. A small blue bird on the front of a bottle that, as it turns out, contained something called ammonia. Ammonia irritates the respiratory system. That is not my opinion. That is in a good many medical references, some of them going back 40 years. Older lungs don't recover the way younger ones do. The capacity diminishes. The lining is more sensitive. And when you're spraying ammonia on your windows every Tuesday, in a kitchen with one small window cracked, you are breathing it. Not all at once, in small amounts, consistently, for years. Bleach is the other one people use without thinking. On its own, it's already hard on the airways. Mixed with ammonia, which people do accidentally, more often than they know, using 2 products in the same space, it releases something called chloramine gas. You don't pass out from it, you just feel a little off. You feel what I was calling 82. There were synthetic fragrances in the floor cleaner. Fragrance is one of those words that can mean almost anything on a product label. It can cover dozens of compounds the manufacturer isn't required to disclose. Some of them are what chemists call volatile organic compounds. They evaporate at room temperature. They accumulate in enclosed spaces over years of use. In older people, in older homes that don't ventilate the way a new house does, this is not a theoretical concern. Eleanor had mentioned something like this once. We were sitting at this kitchen table, probably a Sunday morning. She always talked about her nursing journals on Sundays. And she'd said something about cleaning products and elderly patients. That some of the respiratory trouble she'd seen in home care patients might have more to do with what was under their sinks than what was in their lungs. I nodded, filed it away somewhere. Wisdom has a way of sitting in the room with you and waiting. It doesn't insist. I spent a good while writing down everything I found, what's in those 6 common products, what they do over time, and exactly what I replaced them with and how. It's all in the Coleman Remedy book, the swaps, the measurements, what to absolutely never mix together, and the simple ones that cost almost nothing. The link is in the description below this video. I wrote it because I wanted to get it right, and because I wanted it to exist while I still could write it properly. The antibacterial hand soap under my sink contained something called triclosan. The disinfectant spray had benzalkonium chloride. The dryer sheets I'd kept in the laundry room for decades because Eleanor liked how the sheets smelled, those contained phthalates. I'm a mechanical engineer. I spent 31 years at the TVA learning to read technical specifications and ask, what does this actually do? That question, applied finally to my own cleaning cabinet, was a long time coming. Nobody's going to sell you this in a bottle. That's something my daddy said about honest knowledge, and I've always thought it was true. The things worth knowing are usually the things nobody profits from you knowing. I had been breathing those 6 things in combination in my own kitchen every single Tuesday for the better part of a lifetime, and I had been calling it clean. My granddaughter Clara came to visit last spring. She's 14, Patricia's middle child, the one who has Eleanor's way of noticing things. That particular stillness, the way she walks into a room and takes quiet inventory of everything in it before she decides to say anything. She'd been here about 2 hours. I was at the kitchen table with a book when she appeared in the doorway and said, without any preamble, "Grandpa, what's that smell?" I looked up. "What smell?" "Like something chemical. It's coming from under the sink." It was a Tuesday. I had cleaned that morning. I told her it was just the cleaning things. She said her science teacher had been talking about something. She looked down at her notebook where she'd written the words, volatile organic compounds, VOCs. Her teacher had told the class that seniors were particularly at risk because older homes had less ventilation, and older adults spent a higher percentage of their time indoors than any other age group in the country. I looked at this child for a long moment. She looked back at me, completely calm, 14 years old with Eleanor's eyes, telling me something her science teacher had said, and not knowing, she could not have known, that I'd been sitting in that kitchen for 5 years since Eleanor died, walking through a fog some mornings that I had been calling grief and age and the general condition of being old. I opened the cabinet under the sink. 6 bottles. I'd seen them 10,000 times. I stood there and looked at them the way I would have looked at a piece of equipment at the TVA after someone informed me there was a design flaw we'd been walking past for 20 years, with the particular, slightly sick recognition of a thing that was always there. That night I got down my father's notebook from the shelf above the old encyclopedias. It's a hand-bound book, worn brown cover, his careful block handwriting across over 200 pages. Remedies and observations accumulated across 60 years of Appalachian knowing. I wasn't looking for anything specific. I turned pages the way you do when you're not searching, just sitting with something. And I came to a page near the front that I had read before and somehow never applied. My father had written in his deliberate, careful print about the things inside a house that make people sick. Coal dust, kerosene vapor, Lye kept where children could breathe it over time. The things that accumulated quietly. He had listed them the way a methodical man lists anything. Matter of fact, without alarm, because alarm has never once solved anything. At the bottom of the page, in slightly smaller writing, as if he'd come back and added it later, he had written, "What you stop noticing is what gets you." I sat with that for a long time. The next morning I went to the grocery store and bought a bottle of white vinegar for $1.14. The vinegar goes in a spray bottle now, half vinegar, half water. That handles the windows and the mirrors and the glass on the back door. Baking soda on the bathroom tiles with a little warm water does everything the white foam ever did, without the sharp, back-of-the-throat smell. A bar of Castile soap, unscented, dissolved into a bucket for the floors. $3 for a bar that lasts the better part of 4 months. Hydrogen peroxide in its plain brown bottle for the counters. The same hydrogen peroxide that's been in drugstores for 100 years. No bird on the label, no mystery ingredients. A cut lemon kept by the sink for whatever needs a little more. The house doesn't smell like metal on Tuesday afternoons anymore. It smells like not much of anything. I've come to understand that's what a clean house is actually supposed to smell like. The fog in the mornings is gone. I want to be careful with that statement. I'm not a doctor, and I'm not going to pretend I ran a clinical trial in my kitchen. I'm a man who woke up for 2 years feeling like something had settled in his chest and called it age, and who then made a handful of cheap, simple changes and started waking up differently. That's the whole of it. You can make of it what you will. My father would not have been surprised. He had a practical man's suspicion of complicated things. He believed most good solutions were simple, and that if something required a list of ingredients you couldn't pronounce, it probably had something to hide. He wasn't right about everything, but he was right about more than I gave him credit for when I was young and thought I knew better than a man who'd never left Kentucky. Eleanor would have wanted me to say this sooner. She had the knowledge. She had the nursing experience. She had read the right things. She'd said something right here at this table. But we were busy the way people are busy when they're raising children and working and trying to hold a life together. You file things away and mean to come back to them. Sometimes 60 years pass and you're standing at a kitchen sink holding a bottle you never once questioned. I've written it all down. Everything I found about those 6 products. What's in them. What they do over time, and why older bodies handle them differently than younger ones. My father's page about house poisons and what he used instead. Eleanor's observations from her nursing years about respiratory health in elderly patients and what she saw in their homes. And the swaps, simple, cheap, old-fashioned. That cost me less in a single month than 1 bottle of that floor cleaner used to. I put it all into the Coleman Remedy book. The link is in the description, right below this video. It is not a medical document. It's a record, the same way my father's notebook was a record. One man writing down carefully what he observed and what worked, before he couldn't write it anymore. Read it the way you'd read something left on a kitchen table for you. Not a prescription, not a product. Just what one stubborn old man figured out and thought was worth leaving behind. Clara came back in the summer. She walked through the kitchen without pausing, went straight to the cookie tin, and asked whether I had the oatmeal ones from last time. I did. We sat at this table and talked for a while. She said she thought she might want to be a doctor someday. She said she liked the idea of paying attention to things other people walked right past. Eleanor would have loved that answer. There is a quiet that comes, not from solving things, but from finally seeing them clearly. I walked past 6 bottles under that sink for 60 years. They weren't there to harm me. Nobody put them there with bad intentions. But at 84, I finally stopped and asked what was in them. One quiet question, 40 years overdue. It turned out to be worth asking. My daddy used to say, the most expensive cure is the one somebody sells you. I never forgot it. I just forgot to apply it to the things that didn't come with a prescription label. I'm not making videos. I'm leaving letters. This one's for whoever needed to hear it today.